Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Our gospel today goes to show that Jesus not only loves sitting down with people to share a meal, He is also inclusive, even saying yes to the invitation to dine with the Pharisees and the scholars of the law who sneak to ensnare Him. Even those who oppose Him are loved by Him. And this particular meal is no different to all other meals He had with tax collectors and sinners, His meal with His disciples. Every meal is always a moment of learning, a moment of healing, then a moment of celebrating. You know, twice Jesus posed a question to the Pharisees. The first question was, is it lawful to cure on a Sabbath day or not? The second one, who among you, if your son or ox falls into a cistern, would not immediately pull him out on the Sabbath day? On both occasions, the Pharisees did not answer him. That would have been a good teaching moment for them. But because of their ill intentions and hardened hearts, they couldn't see way past the law. They were waiting for Jesus to make a mistake, to make a transgression against the law. But they could not see the good Jesus is doing that fulfills the spirit of the law. The moment of learning missed. There was a man suffering from dropsy or edema, minamanas in our modern terms. And perhaps this man was planted by the Pharisees themselves, setting Jesus up to make a mistake. They invited the man in the meal, but they could not care less about his swelling. But Jesus saw him, and the meal became a moment of healing. Jesus, out of compassion, healed him from his affliction. And as I have said before, the sickness Jesus heals is reflective of the sickness of those who choose not to listen and not to follow Him. The Pharisees have bloated and puffed up egos. They are the ones who needed healing the most, and yet their swollen pride kept them from recognizing how sick they were. The moment of healing wasted. Now, if there were people who were celebrating after this miracle, perhaps there were only few. Definitely the man who was cured and Jesus Himself. The meal was a moment to rejoice, but most of those seated with Him were reduced to silence. They did not see the grace God was giving generously to those who want it. Only few recognized this undeserved gift, and thus only few gave thanks and rejoiced. The moment of celebrating lost. My dear brothers and sisters, it was not an accident that Jesus instituted the new covenant of His body and blood in a meal, in the Eucharist. It is always a moment of learning through His Word, a moment of healing through His graces, and a moment of celebrating for these undeserved graces. There is always a miracle in every Mass, but the question is, are we open to witness such miracle, such power and overflowing graces? Or are we like the Pharisees, those that St. Paul mourns about in our first reading? Those people to whom the adoption, the covenants, the law, the worship, the patriarchs, the promises, and even the Messiah were all given, and yet they did not recognize God's power, miracle, and grace fulfilled in Jesus, who were speaking to them and sitting right next to them, sharing a meal with them. Today, as we honor the most sacred heart of Jesus, pierced on the cross, pouring out blood and water as the wellspring of the Church's sacraments, Let us ask for the grace to recognize God's power and miracle happening in our daily lives, especially in every celebration of the Mass, that in the mystery of this sacrament, it will always be for us a moment of learning, healing, and celebrating. Amen.